What would you do if the daughter you raised, the one you poured every ounce of your heart into, hid the truth about your own life from you? I'm Susan Bennett, and I never thought I'd be asking that question. But at 58, standing in a room full of people I thought I knew, I learned the cost of trust. My daughter Emily, the girl I'd sacrificed everything for, had kept a secret so devastating it unraveled the life I'd built. And when the truth came out, it didn't just break me, it broke her world.
Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from, because this story is about to take you on an emotional journey you won't soon forget.
I live in a small house on the outskirts of Raleigh, North Carolina, a place where the air smells of pine and the summers hum with cicadas. For 30 years, I was a mother, a widow, a provider. My husband Robert passed when Emily was just 6, leaving me to raise her alone. I worked double shifts at the hospital, my hands raw from scrubbing floors, my back aching from long nights. Every penny went to Emily, her ballet lessons, her college fund, her dreams. I didn't mind. She was my light, my reason. Her laughter filled our little home, and her hugs made every sacrifice worth it. I thought we were a team, unbreakable. Last spring, Emily turned 28. She'd moved to Charlotte, a 2-hour drive away, and was thriving as a graphic designer. I was prouder than I could ever say. She'd call me every Sunday, her voice bright through the phone, telling me about her work, her friends, her life. I'd listen sipping coffee from the same chipped mug I'd used since she was a kid, picturing her smile. She was my world, and I thought I was still part of hers. So, when she invited me to her birthday party, I felt like I'd won the lottery. A chance to see her, to be part of her life again, it was everything. I spent weeks preparing. I baked her favorite lemon pound cake, the one she'd begged for as a girl, the kitchen filling with the sharp, sweet scent of citrus. I ironed my best dress, a navy blue one that made me feel a little less like the tired woman in the mirror. I even splurged on a gift, a delicate silver necklace with a heart pendant engraved with "Forever, my girl." It cost me 2 months' savings, but I didn't care. Emily deserved it. I wrapped it carefully, my fingers trembling with excitement, imagining her face when she opened it. The drive to Charlotte was long, the highway stretching under a gray April sky, but my heart was light. I was going to see my daughter, to celebrate her, to feel like a mother again. The party was at a trendy loft in downtown Charlotte, all exposed brick and fairy lights. I arrived early, my cake balanced in one hand, the gift tucked under my arm. The room was already buzzing, young people in sharp outfits, laughter bouncing off the walls. I felt out of place, my dress suddenly frumpy, my hands rough against the smooth wrapping paper. But then I saw Emily. She was radiant, her dark hair swept up, her eyes sparkling as she moved through the crowd. I waved, my heart swelling, but she didn't see me. She was busy, I told myself. It's her day. I set the cake on a table next to sleek catered trays that made my homemade effort look small. I clutched the gift, waiting for a moment to pull her aside. People smiled politely, but I could feel their glances, Emily's mom, the outsider. I didn't mind. I was there for her. But as the night wore on, something felt wrong. Emily barely spoke to me. She'd flash a quick smile, then turn back to her friends, her voice loud and confident. I stood by the wall, sipping warm soda, the necklace heavy in my pocket. And then I heard it, a single sentence that stopped my world. "Mom's just here for show," Emily said to a friend, her voice low but clear, her back to me. "She doesn't really get my life anymore." The words hit like a slap. My chest tightened, the room blurring. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, but her friend's laugh, sharp and knowing, told me I hadn't. I looked down at the gift in my hand, the heart pendant mocking me. And then I saw something else. A woman across the room, older, elegant, with Emily's arm looped through hers. Emily called her mom. My daughter, my Emily, was calling another woman mom. and that's when I knew something was terribly, horribly wrong. The loft's fairy lights flickered like dying stars, casting shadows that danced across my trembling hands. I stood frozen, the silver necklace still clutched in my pocket, its engraved words, "Forever. My girl now a cruel joke." Emily's voice echoed in my head, her casual dismissal cutting deeper than any knife mom's just here for show. And that woman, the one she called Mom with such ease, stood across the room, her elegant silk scarf and confident smile a stark contrast to my rumpled dress and aching heart. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my feet felt glued to the floor, my throat tight with a grief I couldn't name. The woman's name was Lillian Carter. I learned it when Emily introduced her to a group of guests, her arms still linked with Lillian's, her laughter bright and carefree. Lillian was in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair and a voice that carried the polished warmth of someone used to being admired. "This is my mom," Emily said again, her eyes sliding past me as if I were a stranger. The guests nodded, smiling, unaware of the invisible wound opening in my chest. I felt like a ghost watching my own daughter rewrite my existence. Every sacrifice, every late-night shift, every skipped meal to pay for her tuition dissolved into that single word Mom given to someone else. I forced myself to move my legs heavy as I edged toward the refreshment table, hoping to blend into the crowd. My lemon pound cake sat untouched, its sugary glaze glistening under the lights ignored next to the sleek charcuterie boards. I poured myself another soda, the fizz hissing like my racing thoughts. Who was Lillian? Why was Emily doing this? I replayed our Sunday calls, her cheerful updates about work and friends. Had they been lies, or had I been too blind to see the truth? My fingers brushed the necklace, and I felt a surge of anger, not at Lillian, not yet, but at myself for believing I still mattered. I didn't confront Emily, not then. The party was her stage, and I was an uninvited guest in her world. Instead, I watched. Lillian moved through the room with a quiet authority, her hand resting on Emily's shoulder, her laughter mingling with the clink of wine glasses. They looked like a unit, a family. I saw Emily's friends gravitate toward Lillian, their faces lit with respect, while I stood alone, my homemade cake, a silent testament to my irrelevance. But it was Emily's behavior that hurt most. She didn't just ignore me, she avoided me. When I tried to catch her eye, she turned away, her smile faltering for a split second before she plunged back into conversation. It was deliberate, calculated, and it made my stomach churn. The night dragged on, each minute a fresh wound. I was about to leave, my heart too heavy to stay, when I overheard something that stopped me cold. Emily and Lillian were in a corner, their heads closed, their voices low. I stood behind a potted plant, its waxy leaves brushing my arm, and strained to hear. "She doesn't suspect anything," Emily said, her tone sharp, almost smug. "I've got the account under control." Lillian's response was softer, but I caught the words savings and trust. My breath caught. Savings, trust. My mind raced to the joint account I'd set up for Emily years ago, a nest egg I'd built from years of overtime meant for her future, a house, a wedding, a safety net. It had over $80,000, my life's work. I'd given Emily access when she graduated college, trusting her to use it wisely. Had she... I couldn't hear more. They moved away, their voices swallowed by the party's hum, but those words lit a fire in me. I slipped into the bathroom, the fluorescent light harsh against my pale reflection. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and logged into my bank app, the screen glowing in the dim stall. My fingers fumbled the password, taking 3 tries. When the account loaded, my heart sank. The balance was $12,347. Over $60,000 was gone. Transactions I didn't recognize stretched back months, transfers to an account I didn't know labeled LC Consulting. LC Lillian Carter. My knees buckled and I gripped the sink, the cold porcelain grounding me. Emily hadn't just replaced me with another mother, she was stealing from me. The betrayal was a physical ache, a weight crushing my chest. I thought of the years I'd spent building that account, the nights I'd come home too exhausted to eat the dreams I'd set aside for her. Emily had been my everything, the girl who'd once drawn me crayon hearts and promised we'd always be best friends. Now she was draining my savings, erasing my role, and parading another woman as her mother. And Lillian, her calm, polished demeanor, suddenly felt like a mask hiding something calculated. What hold did she have over my daughter? Was she the mastermind, or was Emily acting alone? I left the bathroom, my face composed, but my mind a storm. I didn't confront them, not yet. I needed proof, a plan, something to hold on to. As I grabbed my coat, Emily finally approached, her smile tight. "Leaving already, Susan?" she said, her voice laced with something I couldn't place, guilt maybe, or defiance. She didn't call me Mom. I nodded, my throat too raw to speak, and handed her the gift. "Happy birthday!" I managed, my voice cracking. She took the box, her fingers brushing mine, and for a moment I saw the little girl who'd clung to me after Robert's funeral. But then she turned away, and the moment was gone. The drive back to Raleigh was a blur, the highway lights smearing through my tears. The necklace was gone, but its weight lingered, a reminder of the love I'd poured into a daughter who'd betrayed me. When I got home, the house felt emptier than ever, the silence deafening. I sat at the kitchen table, the chipped mug cold in my hands, and stared at the bank app's damning numbers. 12 of 347s. That was all I had left of my life's work. But it wasn't just the money, it was the trust, the bond, the years I'd given her. Emily hadn't just taken my savings. She'd taken my identity as her mother. I couldn't sleep that night. The pine-scented air drifted through my open window, but it brought no comfort. I kept replaying Emily's words, Lillian's presence, the missing money. I thought of calling Emily, demanding answers, but something stopped me. She'd lied to me, manipulated me, and I needed to know why. I opened my laptop and searched for LC Consulting. The website was sleek, professional, with Lillian's photo front and center, her smile as polished as her scarf. She was a financial consultant specializing in wealth management. Wealth management. My wealth. My stomach twisted as I realized how deep this went. By dawn, my grief had hardened into resolve. I wasn't the naive widow who'd trusted blindly. I was Susan Bennett, the woman who'd raised a daughter alone, who'd survived loss, and built a life from nothing. Emily and Lillian thought they could erase me, but they didn't know the strength I'd buried beneath years of sacrifice. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had something they couldn't take, the truth. And I was going to find it no matter what it cost. The morning sun filtered through my kitchen curtains, casting faint stripes across the table where my laptop sat open. Lillian Carter's polished smile staring back from the LC Consulting website. I hadn't slept, my eyes burning from hours of scrolling through pages of financial jargon that meant nothing to me. Wealth management, the site promised, but all I could see was my $60,000, my life savings, siphoned away into a void labeled LC. My chipped coffee mug sat untouched, the brew inside cold and bitter, like the anger simmering in my chest. I wanted to call Emily, to scream until she explained why she'd done this, why she'd replaced me with a stranger. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to understand the depth of their betrayal before I faced her. For days, I kept up appearances. I went to work at the hospital, my hands scrubbing floors with a rhythm that matched my racing thoughts. I smiled at patients, nodded at colleagues, but inside, I was unraveling. Every night, I'd come home to my quiet Raleigh house, the pine-scented air heavy with memories of Emily's childhood. her crayons scattered on this very table, her giggles echoing in the hall. I'd sit and stare at the bank app, the $12.347 balance, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I called Emily on Sunday, as always, my voice steady despite the ache in my throat. "How's work?" I asked, and she chatted about deadlines and clients, her tone bright, oblivious to the storm she'd unleashed. She didn't mention Lillian or the party, and I didn't ask. I was playing her game, but I was learning the rules. I tried to fix things to believe it was a mistake. I sent Emily a text casual asking about the necklace I'd given her. "Did you like the gift?" I wrote, my fingers hesitating over the send button. Her reply came hours later. "Yeah, it's nice. Thanks. No mom, no warmth." I pictured her typing it, maybe with Lillian nearby, and my heart twisted. I deposited $500 into the joint account, a test telling myself it was for her rent, her groceries. Within 2 days, it was gone, another transfer to LC Consulting. My test had failed, but it lit a spark. Emily wasn't just distant. She was draining me deliberately, and Lillian was part of it. I couldn't confront her without proof. I wasn't the woman who'd raised her to be fooled twice. So I endured, keeping my pain locked away, my days a blur of work and sleepless nights. But the weight of it was crushing. Every bill I paid, every grocery run reminded me how little I had left. I'd sacrificed my 40s and 50s for Emily, skipping vacations, wearing shoes, until they frayed all to build that nest egg. Now at 58, I was starting over, and the injustice of it burned. I needed help, someone to make sense of the numbers, the lies. That's when I met Diane. Diane Wilson was a nurse at the hospital, a wiry woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense laugh. We'd shared coffee breaks for years, swapping stories about our kids. Her son was a teacher in Durham, mine, a designer in Charlotte. I'd never told her about Emily's betrayal. Shame kept my lips sealed. But one evening, as we sat in the break room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I broke. "Diane," I said, my voice low, "what do you do when your kid steals from you?" Her eyebrows shot up, but she didn't flinch. She leaned in her coffee cup, cradled in her hands, and listened as I poured out the story, the party, Lillian, the missing $60,000. When I finished, my face was wet with tears I hadn't noticed falling. Diane didn't offer platitudes. Instead, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. "My cousin's a lawyer," she said. "Retired, but he knows money stuff. You need someone to look at that account, Susan?" She texted me his number. "Frank Sullivan, no relation, with an office in downtown Raleigh. Call him," she said, her voice firm. "You're not invisible, and you're not alone." Her words were a lifeline, the first hint of hope I'd felt in weeks. Diane wasn't just a co-worker. She was a mirror showing me I was still worth fighting for. I called Frank the next day, my hands shaking as I dialed. His voice was gravelly calm, like he'd heard 100 stories like mine. I met him at his office, a cramped room smelling of old books and lemon polish. I brought bank statements, the joint account agreement, anything I could find. Frank's glasses slid down his nose as he flipped through the papers, his pen tapping the desk. "This LC Consulting," he said, "it's a shell. No real services, just a front for moving money." My stomach dropped. He pointed to the transfers, his finger tracing Emily's name on the authorization forms. "Your daughter's signature," he said, not unkindly. "But someone's guiding her. This Lillian Carter, she's not new to this." Frank's words were a blade slicing through the last threads of denial. Emily wasn't just misled, she was complicit. But there was more. Frank pulled up public records on his computer, his fingers clicking the keyboard. "Lillian Carter's got a history," he said. "Fined in '98 for fraud in Virginia under a different name, Lillian Morse. She's careful, but not invisible. Fraud." The word echoed heavy as the hospital floors I scrubbed. Lillian wasn't just a mother figure to Emily. She was a predator, and my daughter was her tool. I felt sick, but Frank's steady gaze kept me grounded. "We can trace the money," he said. "It's not gone, Susan. Not yet. That night, I sat in my living room, the hum of cicadas outside my window, a faint pulse. Frank's words replayed, "Trace the money not gone." But it was the next discovery that shattered me. I'd kept a box of Robert's things in the attic, papers and letters I hadn't touched since his death. Desperate for answers, I climbed the creaky ladder, the air thick with dust and memory. Among the faded bills and photos, I found an envelope yellowed, addressed to me in Robert's slanted handwriting. My heart raced as I tore it open, the paper brittle under my fingers. Inside was a letter dated 2 weeks before Robert's car accident. "Susan," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and there's something you need to know." My breath hitched. He wrote about Emily, about a woman he'd met years before me, a woman named Marianne, who'd left him when she learned she was pregnant. He'd never told me, afraid it would break us. Marianne died when Emily was a baby, and Robert took her in, raising her as ours. Emily wasn't my biological daughter. The words blurred through my tears, the attic spinning. I'd loved her, raised her, given her everything, but she wasn't mine by blood. And somehow, Lillian knew. The letter didn't say how, but it mentioned a trust Robert had set up for Emily, separate from our joint account, worth $200,000 hidden in a bank in Wilmington. He'd never told me wanting it to be Emily's safety net. But Lillian's mention of a trust at the party clicked into place. She wasn't just after my savings. She was after Robert's legacy, using Emily to get it. The betrayal wasn't just Emily's. It was a web spun by a woman who'd preyed on my daughter's heart and my trust. I sat in the attic, the letter crumpled in my lap, dust settling on my skin. The pain was unbearable, not because Emily wasn't mine biologically, but because she'd chosen Lillian over me, the mother who'd raised her. I wanted to give up, to let the grief consume me. But then I thought of Diane's words. "You're not invisible," and Frank's promise to trace the money. I wasn't done. Lillian thought she'd won, and Emily thought I was too weak to fight. They were wrong. I called Frank the next morning, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. "Find that trust," I said, "and find out how Lillian got to Emily." He agreed, his tone brisk but warm. I hung up my hands, no longer shaking. The attic letter was my breaking point, but it was also my spark. I wasn't just fighting for my money, I was fighting for my truth, my worth, my life. Lillian and Emily had taken enough. It was time to take it back. The air in Frank's office was thick with the scent of old books and lemon polish, the kind of smell that clung to your clothes long after you left. I sat across from him, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the weight of Robert's letter still heavy in my mind. It had been a week since I'd found it, a week of sleepless nights and whispered plans. Frank's desk was cluttered with papers, bank records, trust documents, and a single photograph of Lillian Carter, her polished smile mocking me from the page. "We've got enough," Frank said, his gravelly voice steady as he pushed a folder toward me. "It's time to act, Susan." My heart pounded a drumbeat against my ribs. Acting meant confronting the truth, not just in my head, but out loud in a way that couldn't be undone. For days, I'd wrestled with the idea, my mind torn between the mother who'd raised Emily and the woman who'd been betrayed. I'd spent years giving my time, my money, my heart, only to have it thrown back in my face. But now, with Frank's evidence and Diane's encouragement ringing in my ears, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Lillian and Emily thought they'd erased me, but they'd underestimated the strength I'd built from years of sacrifice. The plan was simple, but bold. Frank had traced the $60,000 from my joint account to an offshore account tied to Lillian's shell company, LC Consulting. He'd also found the trust Robert had set up, the $200,000 hidden in a Wilmington bank, untouched but targeted. Lillian had forged documents using Emily's name to request access, but the bank had stalled, sensing fraud. Frank had drafted a legal injunction to freeze both accounts and revoke Emily's access to my finances. It wasn't violent, wasn't cruel, but it was finally a line in the sand that said, no more. I signed the papers, my pen scratching the page like a blade, each stroke a release of the pain I'd carried. That afternoon, I drove to Charlotte, the highway, stretching under a sky bruised with clouds. My navy blue dress, the same one I'd worn to Emily's party, felt like armor now. Its creases a reminder of the woman I'd been, and the one I was becoming. Frank had arranged for the injunction to be delivered to Lillian's office, a sleek glass building in downtown Charlotte, and I wanted to be there when it happened. Not to gloat, not to scream, but to stand tall to let them see me. I parked across the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel, the engine's hum fading as I watched the building's entrance. At 3:00 p.m., a courier stepped out of a van, a manila envelope in his hand. My breath caught as he disappeared inside. Minutes later, Lillian emerged, her silk scarf fluttering in the wind, her face pale as she clutched the envelope. Emily was with her, her dark hair loose, her eyes wide, with something I hadn't seen in years, fear. They stood on the sidewalk, arguing, their voices sharp, but too far for me to hear. Lillian's hands gestured wildly, the envelope flapping like a wounded bird. Emily shook her head, her shoulders hunching, and for a moment I saw the little girl who'd clung to me after Robert's death. But then Lillian grabbed her arm, pulling her back inside, and the moment passed. I didn't move. I sat in my car, the leather seat creaking under me, and let the weight of what I'd done settle. The injunction wasn't just a piece of paper. It was my voice, my power reclaimed after months of silence. My savings, or what was left of them, were safe, locked away from Lillian's grasp. The trust Robert's legacy was protected, at least for now. I'd cut the strings Emily had used to puppet my life, and the freedom was intoxicating, even if it came with a pang of guilt. I'd raised her, loved her, and now I'd stopped her. It wasn't revenge, it was survival. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the street, I felt a shift inside me. The ache was still there, the love for Emily, a bruise that wouldn't fade, but it was joined by something new, strength. I wasn't the ghost from the party standing by the wall with a forgotten cake. I was Susan Bennett, the woman who'd built a life from nothing, who'd faced loss and kept going. The necklace I'd given Emily, it's forever. My girl engraving flashed in my mind, but it didn't hurt anymore. It was a symbol of what I'd given, not what I'd lost. Lillian and Emily didn't see me, but I saw their reaction as they re-emerged, Lillian's face tight with fury, Emily's eyes red-rimmed. A black SUV pulled up, and they climbed in the door, slamming with a thud that echoed in my chest. As they drove away, I started my car, the engine roaring to life. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. The injunction was my message, delivered not in tears or shouts, but in the quiet power of action. They'd underestimated me, thought I'd crumble under their betrayal. They were wrong. I drove back to Raleigh, the clouds breaking to reveal a sliver of sunset, its golden light warm against my skin. My hands were steady on the wheel, my heart lighter than it had been in months. The hospital loomed in my mind, the floors I'd scrub tomorrow, the patients I'd smile for. But now, those routines felt like choices, not burdens. I'd taken back my power, not just from Lillian and Emily, but from the years of self-doubt that had kept me small. The road stretched ahead, familiar yet new, and for the first time I felt like I was driving toward something, not away. When I got home, I didn't open my laptop or check my phone. I didn't need to see Lillian's website or Emily's texts to know what I'd done. Instead, I walked to my kitchen, the pine-scented air drifting through the window, and poured a glass of water. The chipped mug sat on the counter, a relic of a life I'd outgrown. I didn't need it anymore. I raised the glass, the water catching the light, and drank deeply the coolness grounding me. This was my moment, my turning point, and I wasn't going back. The Raleigh sunrise painted my kitchen walls in soft pinks, but the warmth didn't reach me. I stood at the counter, my hands wrapped around a fresh glass of water, the chipped mug relegated to a cupboard corner. The silence of my small house was no longer oppressive. It was mine, a space I'd reclaimed. The injunction had landed like a stone in still water, and now the ripples were coming. My phone sat on the table, its screen dark, but heavy with the weight of what I knew would follow. Lillian and Emily wouldn't let go easily. They'd fight claw, try to pull me back into their web. But I was ready. By mid-morning, the first wave hit. My phone buzzed, Emily's name flashing across the screen. I hesitated, my thumb hovering the memory of her red-rimmed eyes, in Charlotte, flickering in my mind. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice when I played it was a mix of panic and practiced charm. "Susan, we need to talk," she said, her tone teetering between pleading and sharp. "There's been a mistake with the accounts. Call me back, please." No, Mom, no apology, just a demand wrapped in urgency. I deleted the message, my heart racing, but my resolve firm. She wasn't reaching out to mend things, she was scrambling to save herself. Lillian was next, though not directly. An email arrived from LC Consulting Formal, and cold, claiming the injunction was based on erroneous assumptions and threatening legal action if I didn't retract it. The words were polished, but I could feel Lillian's fury behind them, her elegant facade cracking. I forwarded it to Frank, who called within the hour. "They're bluffing," he said, his gravelly voice calm. "They've got no ground to stand on, but they'll try to scare you. Stay the course." I nodded, though he couldn't see me, the pine-scented air through my window grounding me. Lillian's threats were loud, but they were hollow. I'd taken the first step, and I wasn't turning back. At the hospital, I moved through my shifts with a new rhythm. The floors I scrubbed felt less like a burden, more like a choice, a job I'd earned, a life I'd built. Diane noticed the change, her sharp eyes catching mine during a coffee break. "You look different," she said, stirring her coffee with a plastic spoon. "Lighter." I told her about the injunction, the voicemail, the email. She leaned back, her laugh low and fierce. "They thought you'd fold Susan. Big mistake." Her words were a spark, fueling the fire I'd kindled. Diane wasn't just an ally, she was a reminder that I wasn't alone, that my fight mattered. But Lillian and Emily didn't stop. A week later, I got a letter handwritten delivered to my doorstep, Emily's slanted script on the envelope. My hands shook as I opened it, the paper crisp against my fingers. "Susan," it began, "I'm sorry if I hurt you. I never meant to. Lillian's been helping me manage my finances, and I got in over my head. Please, let's fix this together." The words were soft, almost convincing, but they rang false. I'd seen her signature on the transfer forms, her arm linked with Lillian's at the party. This wasn't regret, it was manipulation, a last-ditch effort to keep me in the dark. I set the letter down my kitchen table, bathed in afternoon light, and didn't reply. The Emily I'd raised was gone, or maybe she'd never existed. Either way, I wasn't her pawn anymore. I needed to solidify my ground to make sure they couldn't touch what was left. Frank helped me open a new bank account separate from Emily, where I transferred the remaining $12.347. He also filed a formal complaint with the state's financial regulator detailing Lillian's history of fraud and the shell company's transactions. "This'll keep her busy," he said, his pen tapping the desk. "She'll have to answer to someone other than you." I thanked him, the weight of his support settling like a warm blanket. But it was my next step that felt like true defiance, a step beyond papers and signatures. I'd always loved gardening, though years of work had left my backyard a tangle of weeds. Inspired by Diane's stories of her own garden, I started small, a patch of marigolds, their golden petals bright against the Carolina soil. Every evening, I'd kneel in the dirt, the earth cool under my hands, the scent of pine mixing with fresh mulch. It wasn't just plants, it was a project, a piece of me I was rebuilding. The hospital staff noticed too. I brought bouquets to the break room, their colors a quiet rebellion against the sterile white walls. "You're blooming," Susan Diane teased, and I smiled, the truth of it sinking in. I was creating something Lillian and Emily couldn't touch. Then came the discovery that clarified everything. Frank called me one evening, his voice urgent. "Found something in the trust documents," he said. "Lillian's been emailing the Wilmington Bank posing as your lawyer, claiming you're incompetent. Emily signed off on it." My blood ran cold. Incompetent. The word was a slap, a calculated move to strip me of control, to let Lillian seize Robert's $200,000 trust. Frank had intercepted the emails, the bank's fraud team now involved. "They didn't count on us," he said, and I could hear his smile. The revelation wasn't just proof of their greed, it was a window into their desperation. Lillian wasn't just manipulative. She was reckless, and Emily was her willing shadow. I faced them one last time, not in person, but through action. Frank suggested a public move, something to show I wasn't hiding. I agreed to an interview with the local Raleigh paper, a small feature on financial scams targeting seniors. I didn't name Emily or Lillian directly. Frank advised against it, with the regulators' investigation ongoing. But I told my story: a widow, a stolen nest egg, a fight to reclaim my life. The reporter, a young woman with kind eyes, listened as I spoke, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. When the article ran, my phone buzzed with messages from neighbors, coworkers, even a patient I'd comforted years ago. "You're so strong," one text read, and I cried, not from pain, but from the realization that my voice mattered. Emily tried one final time, a late-night call. I almost didn't answer. Her voice was raw, no trace of charm. "Susan, why are you doing this? You're ruining everything." I let the silence stretch, the hum of cicadas outside my window filling the gap. "You ruined us." I said my words soft but firm. "I gave you everything, Emily, and you chose her." She sobbed, but I hung up my heart, aching but unbroken. Her tears weren't for me. They were for the life she'd lost, the one she'd built on lies. As I sat in my garden the next evening, the marigolds glowing under the dusk sky, I felt a shift. The pain of Emily's betrayal, Lillian's greed. Robert's secret, it was still there, but it no longer defined me. I'd face them not with anger, but with action, carving out a space where I was enough. The article, the garden, the new account, they were bricks in a new foundation, one I'd build without fear. I wasn't just surviving, I was living, and that was a victory they couldn't take. The late summer air wrapped around me like a soft shawl, warm and heavy with the scent of marigolds and pine. I sat on a wooden bench in my backyard, the garden I'd tended now a patchwork of color golden petals swaying against the Carolina dusk. My hands, once raw from hospital floors, were dusted with soil, a badge of the life I'd begun to rebuild. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full alive with the hum of cicadas and the rustle of leaves. I'd spent months fighting, not just for my money or my name, but for the woman I'd forgotten I could be. And now, as the sky turned amber, I felt it, a peace that didn't depend on anyone else's love. I'd stopped waiting for Emily's calls, her apologies, her tears. The phone sat silent in my kitchen, no longer a tether to a daughter who'd chosen another path. The pain of her betrayal hadn't vanished. It lingered, a quiet ache in my chest, but it no longer ruled me. I didn't need her to call me mom to know I'd been one fiercely and fully for 28 years. I didn't need Lillian's polished lies to unravel to prove I was worthy. I'd raised a child alone, built a nest egg from nothing faced loss, and kept going. That was my truth, and no one could take it away. The hospital became my anchor, not a burden. I still scrubbed floors, but I also started leading a small support group for patients' families, sharing coffee and stories in a quiet corner of the ward. Diane joined sometimes, her sharp laugh cutting through the heavy moments, reminding me I wasn't alone. One evening, a woman in the group, her eyes tired from caring for her sick husband, gripped my hand and said, "You make me believe I can keep going." Her words settled deep a mirror to the strength I'd found. I wasn't just surviving. I was helping others do the same, and that felt like purpose. My garden grew too spilling beyond the marigolds to include lavender and roses, their scents mingling with the pine that defined my Raleigh home. I started a community project, turning a vacant lot near the hospital into a shared garden. Neighbors joined, bringing seeds and stories, their laughter filling Saturday mornings as we dug and planted. A retired teacher, Clara, brought her grandchildren, who ran through the rows, their giggles echoing like Emily's once had. I didn't flinch at the memory. Instead, I knelt beside them, showing them how to press seeds into the earth, my hands steady. This was my family now, not bound by blood, but by choice, by shared growth. Frank called one afternoon with an update, his gravelly voice warm through the phone. The state's investigation had pinned Lillian, her shell company dismantled her accounts, frozen. She'd settled out of court, returning $45,000 of my stolen savings to avoid charges. The trust, Robert's $200,000 legacy, was safe, redirected to a new account in my name alone. I didn't feel triumph, only relief. A chapter closed. A weight lifted. I used part of the recovered money to fund the community garden, naming it New Roots, in quiet defiance of the past. The rest went into savings, not for anyone else, but for me, a future I'd choose. I thought of Emily sometimes, wondering where she was, what she felt. The article I'd done for the Raleigh paper had spread, shared online by strangers who saw themselves in my story. I didn't read the comments, but Diane did, her eyes bright as she told me, "People are calling you a hero, Susan." I didn't feel like one. I was just a woman who'd refused to disappear. Emily never reached out again, and I didn't chase her. Love doesn't mean holding on when someone's let go. It means loving yourself enough to walk away. As the days grew shorter, I found myself at the garden one evening, the air crisp, the roses glowing under a fading sun. I stood alone, my boots sinking into the soft earth, and realized something profound. I was enough. Not because of what I'd given Emily or what I'd lost to Lillian, but because of who I was. Susan Bennett, 58. A gardener, a friend, a woman who'd faced betrayal and built something beautiful from the ashes. The realization wasn't loud. It was quiet like the sunset, but it changed everything. I hosted a small gathering at the garden that weekend, tables set with mismatched plates, string lights twinkling above. Diane was there, Frank too, along with neighbors and hospital friends. We ate potluck dishes, my lemon pound cake among them, its citrus tang, a nod to the past I'd reclaimed. Laughter rose, glasses clinked, and as I looked around, I saw a life I'd made, not inherited or stolen. The sky stretched wide, stars piercing the dusk, and I felt free, not from pain, but from the need for anyone's approval. If you're listening, know this: it's never too late to start over. You don't need the ones who hurt you to see your worth. You need to see it. Plant your own seeds, tend your own ground, and let the world catch up. I did, and I'm still growing. The stars above my Raleigh garden twinkle like promises, kept their light a reminder that even the darkest nights give way to dawn. I'm Susan Bennett, and I've learned that your worth isn't tied to those who betray you. It's in the life you build, the roots you plant. My journey wasn't easy, but it showed me I'm stronger than I ever knew. Now, I want to hear from you. What battles have you fought to reclaim your voice? What seeds have you sown to grow beyond the pain? Share your story in the comments below. Your words matter, and they might light the way for someone else. Every step you take, every truth you claim is a victory. You're not alone, and your voice is powerful. Let's build a community of resilience right here together. Tell me, what's your story? How did you rise? The garden's open, and there's room for us all.
Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from, because this story is about to take you on an emotional journey you won't soon forget.